230 places in a single ranking cycle, 1 week. That is not a gradual climb. That is not steady progress built over months of consistent performances. That is a number that makes you stop and look twice at the leaderboard. And then you find out the player who just did that is 15 years old. To understand why that number is extraordinary, you need to understand what the International Cricket Council T20 International Player Rankings actually measure. They are not a simple points table. They factor in the quality of opposition, the conditions, the match situation, and the recency of performances. Moving 50 places in a single cycle is considered a strong week. Moving 100 places is the kind of shift that gets discussed in cricket analytics circles. 230 places is the kind of movement that forces people to go back and check whether the system registered an error. It did not. And the player at the center of it is not a seasoned international with years of accumulated performances behind him. He is a 15-year-old from Rajasthan who, at the time of writing, has played only a handful of international matches. Vaibhav Sooryavansh's name first appeared in mainstream cricket conversation not through a debut, but through a contract. At 13 years old, he became the youngest player ever to be signed by an Indian Premier League franchise. Rajasthan Royals paid attention to him before most of the country had seen him bat in a serious match. That signing alone was a headline. But headlines are easy to generate. What followed was something harder to manufacture. At 14, Sooryavanshi walked to the crease in an Indian Premier League match and proceeded to dismantle a bowling attack in a way that rewrote the record books. He became the youngest player in the history of men's T20 cricket to score a century. Not just a century, but the second fastest 100 in the entire history of the Indian Premier League. Let that sit for a moment. The second fastest 100 in a competition that has featured some of the most destructive batters the format has ever seen. Players who have spent a decade mastering the craft of T20 batting, and a 14-year-old walked in and put his name next to theirs in the record books. The innings was not a fluke of favorable conditions or a weak bowling lineup. It was a statement of timing, power, and a complete absence of the hesitation that typically defines a young player navigating high-pressure professional cricket for the first time. That 100 was the moment the wider cricketing world stopped treating Sooryavanshi as a curiosity and started treating him as a genuine talent. The Indian Premier League 2026 season became the stage where Sooryavanshi stopped being a record holder and started being a match winner. He finished the tournament as the leading run scorer. Not the leading run scorer among teenagers. Not the leading run scorer among uncapped players. The leading run scorer in the entire tournament. Every franchise in the competition had international players, experienced campaigners, and proven match winners in their lineups. Sooryavanshi outscored all of them, and he did it on a Rajasthan Royals side that didn't even reach the final that season. When the Most Valuable Player award was announced, his name was still called anyway. Think about the weight of that combination. Top run scorer across the whole league. Most Valuable Player on a team that didn't lift the trophy. Most players who win an MVP award are doing it on the back of a title run. Their brilliance and their team's success reinforcing each other in the highlight reel. Sooryavanshi did it without that safety net. His numbers had to stand on their own, with no championship narrative carrying them. And they did. The run tally confirmed volume. The Most Valuable Player award confirmed impact in critical moments, title or no title. But here is something that gets lost in the highlight reel version of this story. Before the Indian Premier League 2026 season, Sooryavansh's early international T20 appearances were not the same story. His first few matches for India at the senior level were measured, cautious even, by the standards he would later set. The strike rates were not eye-catching. The scores were modest. There was a version of this narrative where the Indian Premier League prodigy struggled to translate that form into the international arena, where bowlers are more disciplined and the margins are tighter. That version of the story was entirely plausible for a while, which makes what happened next in the Zimbabwe series all the more significant. Zimbabwe. Not the highest profile series on the international calendar. But rankings points do not carry a prestige filter. Sooryavanshi arrived in that series and performed. 2 half-centuries across the matches. Consistent, controlled, purposeful. Not the explosive carnage of his Indian Premier League 100, but something arguably more valuable at the international level. Evidence that he could adapt his game, read conditions, and build an innings against international bowling. He was awarded Player of the Series, and then the rankings updated. Before the series, Sooryavanshi sat at 278 in the International Cricket Council T20 International Batting Rankings. After the series, he was at 48. 230 places. In one cycle. The number ticking from 278 down to 48 is not just a statistic. It is a visual representation of a player crossing from the periphery of international cricket into its top tier in the space of a single series. 48 in the world, at 15 years old. A ranking of 48 in the world at 15 is not a destination, it is a data point. And data points at this stage of a career require careful interpretation. Cricket history is full of teenagers who announce themselves with extraordinary performances and then encountered the corrections that the game inevitably delivers. Bowlers adjust. Conditions change. The mental load of sustained international cricket is different from a single breakout series. None of that diminishes what Sooryavanshi has already done. The records he holds are permanent. The Indian Premier League season he produced is documented. The ranking jump is real. What it suggests, if you read it carefully rather than hyperbolically, is that the foundation is there. The technique has held up across formats and conditions. The temperament has not buckled under pressure. The conversion rate from domestic dominance to international contribution is already better than most players manage at twice his age. The question is not whether he is talented. That is already settled. The question is what kind of career gets built on top of this foundation. Does the trajectory continue upward at this gradient? Does it plateau as international bowlers build detailed plans against him? Does it dip before it rises again, the way most great careers actually develop when you look at the full arc rather than the opening chapter? Those answers are years away. What exists right now is a 15-year-old sitting at 48 in the world with an Indian Premier League title, a Most Valuable Player award, and a ranking jump that the sport has rarely seen at any age. So here is the question worth debating. Can Vaibhav Sooryavanshi sustain this rate of improvement, or is the nature of elite international cricket that it will find the gaps in his game before he turns 17? The comments section is the place for that argument. If you want to follow how this career develops, subscribing means you will not miss the next chapter. And if you want more on the players rewriting what young talent looks like in modern cricket, the next video is already waiting.